The disciple asks the master, does a dog have a Buddha nature? And the master responds, moo.
Very wise.
That's wow.
It's not even the right animal.
It reminds me of one of my favorite anecdotes of all time, which is from my life. So
you rate it very highly.
it's very short. When I was in the Brompton Oratory at the Latin Mass as a child,
all good
this
anecdotes
madman,
start this way.
all
Go,
of them.
go on, yeah.
This madman runs up to the sanctuary. It's a very big sanctuary. You know, there are several priests saying mass at any given time, and comes up to the lectern and says, "You're all sheep. Moo."
Wow,
then,
very
yeah, the same exact.
It's the
I mean, not the right animal, and he's mooing for a sheep.
That's the Republic of China.
Welcome to the Solomon and Smith Christmas special. Have you heard the Nutcracker yet this holiday season?
Me? No.
Don't know what this means, but I like that there's something about this hat, something about its colour, something about this flag.
I feel like that country borders Mongolia and India.
The back end of the Nutcracker is the most stacked thing. It's sort of, when you listen to the full ballet, you're like, where are the bits from the suite? Where are the bits from the suite?
Yeah.
You get the dun 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 right at the start, and then there's nothing from the suite for hours. And then at the end, the most insane. Like, imagine hearing this live when it comes out. You get that, like, Russian dance going straight into the dance of the reed pipes, going straight into the clown dance, going straight into Waltz of the Flowers.
It is absurd.
Straight into Sugar Plum Fairy. Like, what the hell must have that been like the first time you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, I just compared to the content.
Yeah.
It's like, yep, so it's this thing for, you know, la-di-da-di-da, and then it's just, what is he doing? And then one of the most astoundingly beautiful and moving passages of music towards the end. You're weeping at all of the sweets.
Yeah, you're like, oh my God. 95% of all human melody ever written comes at you in like the last 20 minutes of the Nutcracker. It's so good. I like the build-up, though. I like the slow burn.
It's nice.
Yeah, there's lots of gorgeous bits at the start, but by the end, just because it's so backloaded, it pulverizes you into submission.
It's golden era Simpsons when it gets to that.
Yeah,
it's
just
like
no
my
filler. Goodness, yeah,
all killer.
I love the bit with the children's choir coming in, the Waltz of the Snowflakes, I think, right at the end of part one. Gorgeous. It's so good. It's such good music. I think it's kind of a bit embarrassing to admit how much I enjoy this. It's
people they don't get it.
I'd get rid of every Bruckner symphony to save the Nutcracker. Not even
the
close.
Second half.
Oh my God. It takes a bit of getting used to the sort of but it all sounds like that kind of music-y music. But when it really gets going, it's just
it has some nice sort of ancient associations in my brain. Just because I've heard it so often, it kind of digs into a kind of feeling that the new things can't have. Just certain of those second part, like the do 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 do. There's a lot in there. Pull it up.
That goes directly into. You're like, whoa!
And what you're seeing on stage, if you are seeing it on stage, is just so ludicrous.
This is nothing.
Sweets and chocolates and toys doing that.
With like Yeah, Tchaikovsky writing at total full throttle. Melody here, melody here, melody here. It's bells, it's celestes.
It is
Every part of the
loaded.
orchestra sounds so good. All the wind bits are like the most beautiful thing you've ever heard for winds. All the violin bits are the most beautiful things you've ever heard for violin. It's just so gorgeous. Having a bassoon do that counter melody in Sugar Plum Fairy. Oh, imagine coming up with that.
But just how moving it becomes. Again, nothing to do with what nonsense is going on stage. Just the sheer melody of it, the rising strings.
Yeah. Yeah, the departure of the guests, night. That's just an insanely hysterical, like ecstatic orchestral climax. This time listening to the Nutcracker in the context of having listened more or less exclusively to Stravinsky for the whole of December, exclusively Stravinsky ballets, was quite nice. It was quite nice going like, because Stravinsky, it's all like there's a slightly ironic smile the entire time, and it was quite nice with Tchaikovsky to just get it straight from the teat.
Yeah, there it is. That's it. Enjoy it,
Unironic
folks.
teat juice.
Tchaikovsky can only write things in one way. You have to suspect Stravinsky because he can write things in 4 or 5 ways. And
Yeah,
you sort of,
yeah,
well, which one is you and which one is your puppet? Any of
yeah.
them? Whereas Tchaikovsky, there's only one. There he is.
You're about to listen to a conversation between me, Milo, and Jane Cooper. Initials JC.
That'll be important. Remember that.
Jeremy Clarkson. Jeremy Corbyn. I think that covers it. Jane Cooper is an examination fellow at All Souls College, Oxford. All Souls College only accept 2 students at any given time, and all students in Oxford in a sort of Hunger Games scenario are put into some sort of rodeo pit and forced to sort of outwit one another with Machiavellian schemes. And Jane Cooper managed to sort of, cheat and murder her way to the top of this pile of Oxfordian skulls.
And you can tell, talking to her, it's pretty evident. No mercy in that voice.
Not exactly a ruthful voice.
Our least moral guest? Probably. What is the life of Jane like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining constant Eine kleine Nachtmusik playing.
Yeah. Yeah, very correct pronunciations I noted throughout.
Yeah.
Not always true of someone like Robert Ulcer. He plays around with it. He throws it up and down. But
he's a tennis player lost in
in
a Hebrew academic's body.
And even David Bentley Hart, I think there was a bit of is it, how do you say it?
Yeah.
But Jane's is very confident.
Immediately. Jane is testament to the capacity of British elite institutions to still churn out Ubermensch every now and again. If the entire right wing was like Jane, I'd sign up today. I'm wearing a red hat, the wrong one, but
it's in a way it's the right
up.
One. Is this the right wing? Yes.
Hello. I would like to endorse the right wing with every fiber of my being and limb of my body.
It's good that we have that.
Hey, Milo, you wanna say a bit about what we talked to Jane about? What was this?
Yeah.
So
we spoke about a few things with Jane Cooper. One of those was the poetry of the Earl of Rochester, and the poetry of Alexander Pope, and the poetry of John Dryden. What links these strange men together? A single word. What could it be? Not that. No, it's satire. Satire is what links these men together, and we spoke a little bit about that at great length. with Jane Cooper.
We also spoke about the Austrian novelist Thomas Bernhard. Watching it back, I do talk quite a bit in this episode. Sorry for that.
That's
Yap,
okay.
yap, yap.
That's all right.
Reading sections from Romeo and Juliet.
That got a good response.
I'm gonna go now to a German Christmas market. The viewership are about to watch you read the Dunciad for like a year.
Wrapped.
Sweating in glee. Sweating in glee. Thanks a lot for coming, Jane. We start these chats with a poetic epigraph. Milo has prepared something.
So it is the very end of the Dunciad, where the work reveals itself as a masterpiece, which it had been hiding very, very skillfully up until this point. So I begin. In vain, the all-composing hour, resistless falls, the muse obeys the power. She comes, the sable throne behold, of night primeval and of chaos old. Before her fancy's gilded clouds decay, and all its varying rainbows die away. Wit shoots in vain its momentary fires. The meteor drops, and in a flash expires. As one by one at dread Medea's strain, the sickening stars fade off the ethereal plain. As Argus eyes by Hermes wand oppressed, close one by one to everlasting rest. Thus, at her felt approach and secret might, art after art goes out, and all is night. See, skulking truth to her old cavern fled, mountains of casuistry heaped o'er her head. Philosophy that leaned on heaven before shrinks to her second cause, and is no more. Physic of metaphysic begs defence, and metaphysic calls for aid on sense. See mystery to mathematics fly in vain. They gaze, turn giddy, rave, and die. Religion blushing veils her secret fires, and unawares morality expires. Nor public flame, nor private dares to shine, nor human spark is left, nor glimpse divine. Lo, thy dread empire, chaos, is restored. Light dies before thy uncreating word. Thy hand, great Anak, lets the curtain fall, and universal darkness buries all.
I didn't quite catch that. Can you repeat the whole thing? First question I have in the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle excludes rage that's induced by injustice, induced fury from the passions, which should otherwise be repressed. What do you think distinguishes in the writers we're going to be talking about today, but also in general, righteous anger from unrighteous anger?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. Yeah, that is a central question when it comes to satire, actually, throughout the whole period, because in general, satirists betray a lot of the anger, if we describe features of satire in terms of the deadly sins, unjust and unrighteous anger. And unrighteous anger is something that satirists attack because it is a sin, and as you say, like Aristotle before Christianity also kind of prescribed it, whereas righteous anger was exempt. But yeah, satirists are all basically hyperbolic, and all of them overreact, and they know it. So they tend to cultivate personae and masks and characters who are not exactly themselves in which to speak as satirist. And that's true of the Renaissance, and it carries on all the way into the late 17th century and on into the 18th century as well. Like you have Martinus Scriblerus providing a mask for, Swift and Pope so that they can say things in the voice of a sincere idiot and be exceptionally cruel, but it's distanced from them. And in Rochester, you have, what they call the adversarius voice, who isn't strictly the author, but is taking anger and like rage to an extreme so that he can basically lash out as viciously as possible. Yeah, so I think there is no satire that I can think of by either Rochester or Pope that is measured in its attacks. But Dryden is definitely a bit more measured, as you might have found with Absalom and Achitophel, and he's a bit unusual in the like host of satirists in that he really wants satire to be fairly impersonal. He is also doing something politically quite delicate by, you know, writing about the succession crisis when there was always the prospect of a reunion between Charles II and his son. So yeah, I think Dryden is the least angry of the satirists that we're looking at today, and that is probably motivated by care and the need to be diplomatic as
And not landing on the wrong side of history.
yeah, exactly, especially in that time of such like constant religious and dynastic change. So he
Yeah,
had
I
to
mean,
be
did Dryden like grow up during the Commonwealth era? So he's like
yes,
chaos
so
is in his entire life story, pretty much.
exactly like he
Yeah.
saw constant regime change and even like the funniest thing about him I think is that he wrote a couple of very long didactic poems. The first is called Religio Laici, the layman's religion, and it's a defense of the Church of England. This is before the accession of James II, who's a Catholic, and then after James II becomes king, Dryden writes something called The Hind and the Panther, which is a beast fable, another long didactic poem talking about why the Church of Rome actually is the authoritative church, and they're completely the opposite. But both are written ostensibly, like very sincerely.
Yeah.
A slippery character. I think
Yeah.
the Absalom poem is quite interesting because it does risk being moving. Like the character of Absalom always risks being moving, but you get so into his head. So little of it is really about the David character. And I think the weakest part of the poem is the David character because it seems to lose the beauty and the psychology of the Samuel character. And we get this kind of a whitewashed, he was a good king, but he was a bit too nice, which I feel is almost the opposite of the biblical David, who's a guy who is very politically dexterous, but at the very last thinks, hang on, he's my son. I'd
Mm.
like to save him. Whereas of the Dryden poem, it's more like someone who's like, but he's my lovely son. However, politically, maybe we have to go and get him now at the very last second.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's curious to see maybe the slight undercutting of satire if you do start to sympathize too much with your target to create this more kind of balanced affair. But I suppose in Dryden's terms, maybe he quite likes leaving both options open in case the other James had come up. Well, this poem's quite nice about you if you think about it.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I think, yeah, with the Dryden, this isn't something that, you know, constantly shocks or provokes laughter. Um, I think really the way in which it is a satire is its form. So it's playing on, well, essentially biblical epic, which had been already popularized by Milton and before him by Abraham Cowley. But it's obviously an allegory, political allegory with a target, Shaftesbury. And that's really the thing that makes it satire. I think it doesn't have all of the hallmarks of certainly of the most famous kinds of satire from that period, which were often very, yeah, personal attacks, full of invective, not particularly ironic, actually, lacking irony, but full of feeling. So, yeah, I think, yes, this is a poem that is actually has a very strange effect when you're reading it. You're not exactly sure how you feel about all the people involved. And yeah, the ostensible hero, Charles II or David, it totally takes the back seat.
Alexander
I
Pope.
wish we'd sort of dissed Dryden a bit more. I got quite angry with Dryden by the end of Absalom for wasting his genius on this ridiculous form. I mean, it's the kind of man who's so obviously a genius and so obviously putting it into just a complete waste of time. A
I
complete
didn't hate Absalom.
utter waste of time. Nor did I.
Yeah, I think it could have been better, but
Yeah. But it was like
it
if
had
Shakespeare
its
went into, like getting 100% on like Mario's 64 or whatever. No, stop doing that. Your talents lie
yeah.
elsewhere. That's the level of writing Absalom in John Dryden's career. Do something better with your time, man. You see Mozart there, getting, like stamp collecting. You're like, stop! God put you on earth for higher things. And I think Dryden, like a version of Dryden where it's all just lyric poems, best English poet. Everyone would just go, yeah, best English poet. I mean,
Doesn't
no,
even get a selected
no question
edition.
about this. But writing this big, bloated, ugh, disgustingly consistent.
The ideology is very, very
Ah,
straightforwardly put. And
and
what do you think about this, the link between satire and humor that now is if someone says they're a satirist, they're funny, they're a funny guy who's
Yeah.
maybe into politics. What do you think about the development of that and how with Pope, I think comedy is pretty central, even when he's being quite serious and po-faced, and yet with Dryden, not so clearly a feature. Was this a period in which it was being defined in the English language or Dryden an outlier?
That's a really good question. Because I think Pope and Swift are the first modern satirists, and that the 30 or so years between the careers of Dryden and Pope saw a really big shift. Um, Dryden and indeed the rest of the satirists of the 17th century were, they were interested in causing outrage and laughter, but a lot of the satire was not then like primarily functioning as comedy in the way that it is now, and I think really was with Pope. It was a different genre altogether. Uh, so you kind of have to go further back, look at Renaissance satire, which itself was extremely classical as a mode. It was taken from Horace and Juvenal and Persius. This was about being and they kind of blended the Greeks and the Romans, so they were doing Horatian and Juvenalian like political attacks that were quite veiled for reasons of security, but they were also casting the satirist as basically a kind of Democritus figure, the outsider who is a truth teller who laughs at other people's folly, but it's a mirthless laughter, it's an angry laughter. And they censure everyone and anyone. They are highly self-conscious and neurotic about the fact that they are also liable to hypocrisy. This is very obscure stuff. And the satire is being written by people like John Marston, Joseph Hall, who was an enemy of Milton, and then Ben Jonson when it moved onto the stage. These were, yeah, very much moralistic exercises and about attacking both, groups and ideas as well as individuals that the authors would have hated. So really, I think the sort of elegant sarcasm of Pope didn't exactly define the earlier satires in England, or the satires in the century leading up to Pope. They were, yeah, these things were much more interested in showing up folly in as vicious and kind of naked way as possible. Yes, making witty jokes and so on, but the primary flavor was one of anger or like rancor, and they were satires were therefore they were called things like a snarling satire or a biting satire or a lash against Puritans. The satirist was always depicted with like a bundle of sticks, scourging people and described as a dog, either biting or barking. Yeah, so you don't really get the cynic references as much in Pope and in the 18th century satires, I think.
there's also I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, in the late, like at the turn of the century, all satires were like censored in England or had to go through the Privy Council. So there was also this, maybe another reason for a sort of, if not a toothlessness, then at
Mm.
least a withdrawal at that time from personal attack.
Yeah, I mean, this in theory, yeah, but I think the bishop's ban. This was Bancroft and Whitgift under the reign of Elizabeth. When there was a succession crisis going on then, they were very worried about sedition, about the Earl of Essex, and satires that might have been, implicitly calling for rebellion. So they banned all satire, and then they named a bunch of prolific satirists and said all of their works are to be burnt in London ceremonially and not to be printed. But in reality, I think satire didn't just stop. It moved onto the stage largely. A lot
Mm.
of satires then became performed. And those were funnier than I think probably than the satires that just circulated in manuscript before or in print because they involved acting and, you know, the development of this like malcontent as a character who is both a satirist and a very ridiculous person.
Mm.
They were a bit more playful when they were on the stage, I think. But yeah, it's notable that those stage satires are actually called comical satires, so
Hmm.
they had to be clarified as being comical. Like it wasn't inherent necessarily in satire that there would be comedy. Yeah, so
Yeah, I'm very glad that Swift and Pope do enter the genre specifically, just because I love the energy of this hatred. I remember John Steinbeck said he could only ever write anything out of intense love or out of intense hatred. And with Pope and Swift, it seems the love part of that equation was out, and their entire inner um, faculties of imagination, which were immense, are centered around this need to be against something, to be rejecting something. It's maybe not the case in all writers, but certainly in them, rejection is the great poetic impulse to say no to things, to say no to the world. I mean,
yeah,
in the last section of Gulliver's Travels, it becomes just the most thoroughgoing rejection of humanity, of being human in the broadest possible sense, which is
mm,
obviously overplayed, but with such a kind of conviction that you do come out of it with thinking at least it's at least slightly sincere. The
yeah,
same with his the essay on telling the Irish to eat their children to cure their hunger. It's obviously a joke, and but it's gone through with such seriousness and such imagination and wit in this fake voice that um, I think some contemporary reviewers did actually assume that the writer of A Modest Proposal was being serious at the time. There's this
yeah,
double irony going on.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think Pope had a lot of contempt, so
Mm.
a cold, a still very vehement, but a cold rather than a hot kind of hatred.
Yeah.
And or at least he wanted to write with contempt rather than really passionate hatred, I suppose, to go back to your first question.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's why it's so effective, because he doesn't really let himself, he doesn't make himself vulnerable very often. He always has the upper hand.
Mm.
Yeah. And
This you go ahead.
sorry, no, no, carry on.
Yeah, it sort of just leads me to the imagery of a lot of Pope, and then we can bring Rochester in as well. I think edges on really quite apocalyptic, especially if you just take it literally. Like the Dunciad, the ending that I just read earlier is sort of literally that. This
Mm.
kind of this great list of all of these apparently terrible writers and their terrible habits and all of these tasks and trials they'll be going through. But then at the end, it's not just that the 18th century doesn't have many good writers, but that the sheer absence of beauty is going to result in a world just dark, nothing, bleak
Mm.
end of all time. But that's what a lot of it is pointing to. Even like the Rochester stuff, when his the walk through St. James's Park, the Ramble, I think it's called, and you just start to get the impression, especially if you read a few of them in a row, that the world is just like this. There's
Mm.
predators everywhere. Everyone's out to get everyone. And there are some good comic images. I think in the Epistle to Bathurst or something, one of the Pope epistles, he mentions how bribery would be a lot harder if gold didn't exist, because people would have to move like massive bushels of hay and huge herds. I just nothing to see here, guys. I'm just bringing in my herd of cattle, not to bribe anyone,
Yeah.
but it does create the image. This is what's happening. It's just all of this capital and all of these objects being shifted around.
Mm.
And I wonder if satire sort of began in the English tradition as a somewhat more laid back, maybe violent, but stripped back form. At what point did it become so uproarious, and did that then translate into something else?
Mm.
I think satire in very early English satire was often an attack on ecclesiastical authority and error. So it's actually it's similarly misanthropic, but a bit more confined to religious disputes. But it's very misanthropic because, of course, as the Bible tells us, like the Pharisees are supposed to be the trustworthy ones. They're laying down the law, but they're not. They're actually the worst ones. And that wherever you have power, you have the abuse of power. And I think that is what formed early English satire, and which really flowered during, the 16th century with the Reformation and the rise of Puritans and the enemies of Puritans. So you might have heard of the Marprelate Tracts or the Marprelate controversy, which is, it's like a big a series of pamphlets that attack different bishops. It gets back to that dictum, that the road to hell is paved with the skulls of bishops, and that this is particularly perverse because the bishops are the ones meant to be spiritually setting an example and leading the people into heaven. But in fact, you find human folly most clearly illustrated in their actions. Yeah, so I think you're right that satire, it becomes broadly more, hopeless and even Epicurean, in that it, I think, seeks to retreat from the world. But in English, it was always quite a dark and misanthropic kind of genre. Yeah.
It's quite shocking how misanthropic it is, how early. So many of these, especially the rejection of the state of nature, I associate with a much more post-Darwinian zeitgeist. I think like someone like Thomas Hardy, who has a poem where he to escape the madding crowd, to escape the indefensibly corrupt society, he goes on a walk into the woods, and in the woods he comes to the conclusion the woods are even worse. Nature is even more corrupt at the fundamental level, even more disgusting and hostile to our best intentions than our indefensibly corrupt society. And though it doesn't quite reach this like level of post-Darwin, post-Schopenhauer extreme rejection, it's nevertheless on its way there, especially I think in Swift, but also in Rochester, also in Pope.
I think it's because Rochester's trying to be a pessimistic Hobbesian, so he takes Hobbes deliberately because Hobbes is so hated by the clergy, and Rochester wants to provoke the clergy. He takes Hobbes along with Lucretius, the Roman Epicurean poet, and basically misrepresents them, saying, the state of nature is so brutal, and mankind is also natural in that terrible sense, and therefore the only rational thing to do is to be as animals. But of course, that's not what Hobbes is saying. Hobbes is saying you can actually curtail these baser passions and sides to people with a strong state. So Hobbes is doing a kind of vulgar libertine inflection of Hobbes and the hated Hobbes and the hated Lucretius to be about as provocative as possible, which I think explains why he is so his misanthropy is so extreme and all-encompassing.
And how much do you think Rochester is sort of in on the joke? Because reading through his famous poems, there is a sort of consistent ideology, I suppose, and kind of whether libertinism is an ideology at all or just an impulse. Like I read an interesting idea, which seems very counterintuitive, that the libertine lifestyle was inherited from a certain sect of extremist Christianity during the Civil War period, which were anti-nominalists, the people who were against the rules, that the death of Christ had liberated us from the Mosaic law. And that these people, the ranters in England, but elsewhere, there were other similar groups, that these people were therefore, in being post-Civil War, bringing back that ideology, that sense Is there any of this in Rochester, or is that looking too far into it? Is he more of just a, a philanderer who loves philandering?
I think, yeah, this is a very good question. I think Rochester is not committing to any particular ideology necessarily, sincerely, but he's like sort of simulating being an ideologue in favor of, I don't know, some extreme version of um, libertine atheism or Epicureanism. So I think he's basically using satire to, what's the word, ventriloquize a serious philosopher, but isn't being serious. What I do think he's doing all the time is um, maybe he doesn't even mean to do this, but I think he's sort of eliciting sympathy and pity for the afflicted libertine who dies young of syphilis and becomes disgusted by all of the prostitutes that he's sleeping with. Um, because he's saying, well, I'm too clever to simply be an obedient Christian, and I'm too attractive and too witty not to indulge in all these pleasures, and I'm producing this funny, brilliant literature out of it. But also, this is really a grotesque way of life, and it leads to erectile dysfunction, and it leads to um, accidental, manslaughter, and all of these terrible things. Do you know To a Post Boy by Rochester?
Yeah.
Yes, we both read the complete works in the
You
last
read the
week.
complete
Yeah.
work? Bloody hell. I don't, I mean, wow, okay. I'm not sure I've read the
Including
complete
many
work.
things we, as tender Englishmen would rather not have read.
Too delicate for this guy.
Could I read
Uh,
To a Post Boy like now?
Yeah, please go.
Because it's
yeah,
short
go
and
for it.
it's brilliant. And it's doing what I've just described is, you know, eliciting kind of sympathy for the rogue. And
Mm.
in doing so, it's a triumph because who wants to sympathize with such a bad person? And yet he makes us with his wit. So here's to the post boy, and there are two speakers, Rochester and boy. Rochester, son of a whore, God damn you! Can you tell a peerless peer the readiest way to hell? I've outswilled Bacchus, sworn of my own make, oaths would fright the Furies and make Pluto quake. I've swived more whores more ways than Sodom's walls e'er knew, or the college of Rome's cardinals. Witness heroic scars, look here, ne'er go, cerecloths and ulcers from top to toe. Frighted at my own mischiefs, I have fled, and bravely left my life's defender dead. Broke housed to break chastity, and dyed that floor with murder which my lust denied. Pox on it, why do I speak of these poor things? I have blasphemed my God and libelled kings. The readiest way to hell? Come quick, ne'er stir. The readiest way, my lords, by Rochester. And that's the boy who answers, well, the quickest route is by Rochester, and of course this is
Mhm.
the Earl of. And it's so he's saying I'm going to hell,
Mm.
and
Quite convincing.
yeah.
I wonder if this is a late. I know there's some trouble dating Rochester. My heart tells me this is a late poem, perhaps sweating a little for the
Yes.
life that is now coming to an end. But it's interesting that you see there is a kind of conventionality at the bottom of Rochester, maybe one that develops, or the whole time he sort of, I know this is wrong in a
Mm,
way,
Mm.
because I think there is a way you can read it where he's sort of saying there is something right about it. It's the massive Shelley poem, Epipsychedion, I think, in which he basically uses a lot of very lush vocabulary to justify him having multiple lovers. But in Shelley, I'm sure he means it. I'm
mm,
sure he's saying, this is a way we can live. This is the new reality. Whereas with Rochester, he kind of says that a lot. I don't know how much he means it, or if he's just saying, "Hey, look, this is how life is working," or if this is a very vulgar way of actually defending the
Mm.
reality of human living.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, as you say, you don't know to what extent he means it when he defends what he's doing, and I think he probably it's too difficult to say whether he
Mm.
means it. It's possible that he means it occasionally and then writes in these frenzies of defiance. But he understood his own like chaos and debauchery very well as being something tragic that would lead to an early death. I think he knew he would die young. You know, the sort of romanticized the rock star who romanticizes his own insane decline and the
Hmm.
waste of his talents. Because like Rochester was debauched by the age of 14. He went to Oxford then to Wadham, which was already getting a kind of sodomite reputation. And
Our
um,
last guest as well.
oh, you had a Wadham
Yeah, we
person.
had a Wadham man.
Oh, good. I wonder, I don't know what the reputation is really at the moment. For ages, it really was like LGBT central, both firstly, I think, in a libertine way and then in a political way. But now I don't really hear much about what goes on there. It's only about 500 meters away from me, but
What happens in Wadham?
yeah.
Yeah, Rochester loved satire on reason and mankind, loved upon nothing, and a few of the other little ones, but mostly just such a morally depraved man that he's quite unpleasant to spend any time with.
Yeah. Sometimes they are funny, but I'm
Yeah,
kind of grimacing. I'm like, who?
and he's
Steady sharp.
and he's nice after someone with like a stick so far up his ass like Dryden
John.
going immediately to Rochester afterwards is quite refreshing. There's a good tradition in satire of people go like diving into a wicked or grotesque underworld and then just reveling in it with obvious delight. Um, off the top of my head, I'm just thinking of like novelists like Hermann Hesse, German, and like Henry Miller. Actually, The Tropic of Cancer. This is um, ostensibly a book rejecting this way of life that it's obviously delighting in enormously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you always like this stuff, Jane? Did you always into satire, always into the 17th century, or did this sort of just develop over the time at uni?
That's a good question because I can't remember what um, I initially, read that um, got me interested. I can't remember how I like came upon this as a subject of special interest at all. I was interested in Lucretius before I was interested in satire, I think, and I
Okay.
saw that Rochester had chosen a few passages from Lucretius to translate, and then I read a satire upon reason and mankind and thought it was brilliant.
Hmm.
Um, but weirdly, growing up, I read Pope actually, but not the satires. I was obsessed with an essay on man. I thought it was the best thing ever written.
Hmm.
And that is like the least satirical of Pope's poems. And
When was this? When did you read? Like at
like
school?
I it wasn't at school, but it was at home because my dad always raved about an essay on man. Dad's a Catholic, and loves this theodicy and thinks it's very, he thinks it's philosophically sound,
Hmm.
but also very aesthetically good. So I think I would have been 12 or 13 when I first read it, and I wouldn't have understood a lot of it then. But it's so quotable and indelible that you can't help but read it over and over again. And so that was always my interest in Pope until more recently when I started my PhD and then read um, Peribathos or Batus,
Yeah.
which is brilliant, like so brilliant.
Yeah. Me,
Um,
me and Milo found it very funny that the undergraduates didn't detect the mock voice.
I know.
I mean,
I
there are
completely.
so many passages that are hilarious with that in context. We were saying it reminds us of the people who, like, after seeing the movie Fight Club, went to start fight clubs.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's especially funny in this case because I think the mask falls off quite a few times. Like the kind of blind rage of Pope does he's
Yeah.
just slagging it off for a while. He forgets he's pretending to be this guy and then sort of goes back into it. But it's really surprising that you could read that. Good hint. Although it does create a nice sort of brand of an extremely absurdist poet who's like, these are the rules we ought to follow.
Mm.
And I was talking with Jack about it before that some great poets after the fact, some great romantic poets, some great modernist poets would completely fail Pope's test. So
Yeah.
perhaps these undergraduates are just people of the future. They understand something we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they'd be committed followers of Longinus, who is, of course, the Athenian who wrote on the Sublime, and who was the fixation of John Dennis, who is the great target of Pope and the great frenemy. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's just genius, like to take these rules, which many of them do correspond to real bits of advice in the Longinus text, which is really a rhetorical handbook rather than a bit of aesthetic philosophy. But he shows them to be absurd, like the idea that you should be a bit of a miniaturist in your poetry by listing detail.
Mm.
Um, he shows how, ridiculous and trivial and like um saccharine that is. I think mostly he's quoting Blackmore, but the wider satire is directly targeted at Dennis because of the Longinus interest.
Mm. But like all good satire, it sort of immediately transcends whatever local concerns cause it.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, you
it,
can read it without having any idea who Dennis is, and it's still really good. It's good fun.
yeah. There's a very strong anti-democratic tone in it, which actually is across all of these guys. It's there all the time in Rochester. It's very strongly there in Dryden's Absalom.
Mm.
Um, there's this real resentment of the budding middle class, of growing literacy. Um, does this sort of disdain for plebs have classical forerunners, or is it sort of an innovation of the British?
Well, it's definitely heightened because of the, rise of print and the
Hmm.
growth of literacy after the Reformation, when the Bible was printed and distributed in the vernacular. So, in a sense, that obsession with the rise of middling writers and middling readers and journalists is peculiar to the British moment in the English context in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, yeah. But middle brow, the idea of the middle brow, as opposed to the genius reader or interpreter, is quite classical too. So Plato, and Aristotle as well, but Plato, when he talks about the performance of poetry by rhapsodes, is very concerned with the fact that the rhapsode or the performer is not the same as the poet who is inspired by the muse, and therefore may not understand actually what he is conveying, being a midwit, an actor, and so may mislead his audience as to the meaning, because meaning will depend to some extent on interpretation. And Dryden loves this bit in Plato's Ion, which talks about the risk of, you know, listeners believing that they co-create the meaning of the great text that they're hearing. Um, he thinks that's a real risk, and because in the end, not many people are geniuses. The majority of an audience will be middle brow. And he writes about this a lot in his preface to his translation of the Aeneid, I think. So yeah, it's a classical theme, but is given particular force, I think, in the age of, journalism and coffee houses and
Yeah.
literacy.
Yeah, and the sheer vehemence with which they talk about applause, or any large number of people, anything which diverts a large number of people is to be preferred, I think is one line in there. And
Yeah.
it's like almost like almost Nietzschean in this desire to defend the great mountaintop people from the yahoos, the great unwashed below, trying to level the mountain so that we're all on a level playing field.
I love the bit when he says, well, at the top of the mountain where all of the muses are, yes, they have more crystalline water, but down here our muddy water is much more abundant.
Yeah, yeah,
But there's more of it, therefore it's better. Yeah.
yeah. Our modern writers in their industriousness, both in the weight of their writings and the velocity of their judgments, do so far outstretch the ancients. Yeah. Um, Alexander
I know.
Pope, I was much fonder of on this kind of reread than ever
No,
before in my
yeah, I
life.
think
Alexander Pope gets better with age. What a great poet. Rape of the Lock. I just did that like just before the interview, thinking it's not one of the relevant ones, but I'd like to reread it again. Whoa!
yeah,
Whoa!
my
What?
my second go at rape. The first one, I was like, oh, I bet this was rather amusing back in the day. How droll.
Yeah.
Second time, no, it is.
It's
It's
droll.
wonderful. I'm so amused by this.
It's just constantly so amused. Yeah. Yeah, mate, it's kind of a second read through kind of guy, which is
He
a good
seems to be,
sign. A good
yeah.
sign. As you said, Dunciad, it's like so petty. What the hell is this? And then oh, oh, oh.
I see this is quite bleak, Alexander,
Yeah.
but I appreciate it. This is why I yearn for the modern Dunciad. I think it could
Yeah.
really
And I
turn things
did
around.
reread Essay in Man after the interview as well, and it like got a lot of famous bits. It has that kind of
Yeah.
Casablanca effect of having so many famous bits that it goes from being cliche to kind of being profound. It's
It reminds me of the point where Pope and Rochester kind of overlap on the point in that Pope, under the guise of his pseudonym, says that something good about sort of mediocre poetry is you have to get it out of your brain. You sort of it's a kind of excrement from the mind, and it's a good thing if we get more mediocre poems out
Yeah.
there. And then Rochester in that I think MG to OB epistle
Hmm.
as MG says the same thing essentially. I might not write as well as you, but I've got to get this out of my head.
mm,
And this is of course portrayed by both of them as a very bad thing to do.
yeah.
Keep it under the lid unless it's genius.
Everyone has a great book in them, and that's where it should stay.
Yeah. This is also really funny because it's referring to um, quack physicians who let humors or let blood in order to get rid of some kind of ailment, which is a practice in medicine that was already being contested before Pope. But I think he's referring to this also, as well as there's the proliferation of mediocre writers, there's also a lot of um, really dodgy experimental natural philosophy or science going on. And this is one of Swift's obsessions as well, of course.
Yeah.
You see a lot of it in Gulliver's Travels, but Pope and Swift together keep going back to that theme that there are scientists who do these experiments that don't have proper rigor, methodical rigor behind them, and come up with all these big pseudoscientific claims and dazzle their audiences with them. So the sort of idea of a like substance from the brain being ejaculated is definitely referring to that. I think it's to a Dr. Woodward who was known for talking about um, emetics and vomit and biliousness. So these all are targeted little metaphors that they use. And just before, I will bore you with this for a minute, but I forgot to mention earlier the idea in Renaissance and early modern satire that the satirist is letting the humours of society is quite important, particularly in the early 17th century. The satirist would be framed as someone who's, you know, identifying a preponderance of some bile and cutting into the flesh or and veins of a society to let the humour.
Yeah, didn't
But
George
also
Bernard
this,
Shaw describe himself as a dentist once? And the more rotten the tooth is, the more it's going to hurt.
yeah, that's like a very similar kind of thing going on. Of course, the satirists also gave themselves preponderances of black bile or melancholy. So they would be both doctor and patient, the one who is melancholic because his job is so hard, his job is to treat other people. Um, yeah, so I think maybe also the stuff about the humors in Perry Bathos is also a deliberate reference to the satire as a genre.
Hmm. Did you get to read the Bernhard? Did you? Yeah,
Yes,
you got through it. Yeah,
I really liked it.
oh good. Yeah, it's probably my second time I think this particular book, but I listened to it this time, which makes it go on for quite a while. So I have like 9 hours of this German man screaming in my head uh, during my sort of coming home to Christmas train. Um, yeah, and there's so many overlaps between Bernhard and these people. Certainly in this being the doctor, being
Mm.
someone into a sort of forced state of continuous melancholy and in exaggerated attacks on the people around him. sort of there is ultimately some hope, some truth that's trying to be trying to be wheedled out of the sick organism.
And being self-hating as well,
Yeah,
and attacking pretensions, you know, of aristocracy when really these people are all, you know, m upper middle class at best and tasteless.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
and not artists.
Bernhardt himself was also like he's so guilty of this aspiration for aristocrat. His house in Austria that he lived in is sort of lined with these 18th century portraits, as if of his family line. Yeah, and sort of a man who I think he had a very humble upbringing. I think his father was like a shoemaker or something, died in the war. Yeah, just had a really kind of poor upbringing, and himself is guilty of everything. I love the moment when he's following Auersperger on the street from behind, taking the
Yeah,
perverse pleasure in looking at the back of his head, full
the
of
bald patch.
hatred, at the
Yeah,
bald patch, and he's so angry and disgusted at the sight of the back of Auersperger's head that he has to turn away as if to vomit. And then, in almost vomiting, he sees his own reflection in the mirror and realizes that the hatred is even more extreme, seeing himself in the mirror. Yeah,
yeah. In general, the it's a very like bodily kind of narrative. There's so much reference to the bloat and the varicose veins and the sort of dribble and decline of physical soundness. Yeah, it's actually quite gross, which is very
yeah,
Rochesterian. Um, yeah, I
Yeah,
thought
it
it was really
reminds me of the Epistles of Burlington, I think, the Pope one about house building and all the ways that a house could be wonderful, and having these books in your shelves which are just painted on, and this description of the Auersperger's house with its sort of perfect furniture designed to be looked at perfectly, and then disgusting because it is so perfect, because it means nothing but its own perfectness. And you get the apocalyptic imagery of this Vienna with no good theaters, with no good actors, with no good art, where the only promising composer has just become a nothing after years of being swamped in his own city. And I think in the ending there is sort of a fleck of light, which maybe you don't get. But the Dunciad ends with complete
yes,
darkness, complete nothingness. But I think Bernhardt may be a bit more of a humanist than Pope in that he can see not only himself being very much in it, whereas I feel Pope does remove himself. He's
mm.
looking very much down on this lost world that he's trying to save.
You don't get as many declarations of love, of unironic love in Pope. My reread of Woodcutter's, it was a lot sadder and more touching than I remember it being. I remember Woodcutters on my first read through being the most one of the most unremittingly funny and typically Bernhardian stylistic fireworks pieces. But yeah, on the read through, God, it's a touching book.
Good general contradiction, like Austrian theatre is the worst in the world. The only place with good theatre is London. And then later, even the worst Viennese theatre is
Better
naturally
than
greater than the
the great
best.
London theatre.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we just have such high standards. And the whole thing about the wild duck being a failure except for the lead role, but then by other standards, the whole thing was a success
yeah, yeah.
because of the main role. They can't really decide whether they want to
Hmm.
self-deprecate or self-elevate. Kind of depends on what the other guy says.
Yeah. And kind of when I was writing Jenny, like a lot of that spirit went through. It's nice to just write character and not actually bother looking at whether they're contradicting themselves. Does this feel
Yeah.
like the kind of thing Jenny would say? Yes. So it goes in, irrespective of whether Jenny had paragraphs and paragraphs contradicting this very same point in the previous chapter.
Yeah, and you encounter it a lot. I often meet people who have chosen to live in London, have lived here a long time, who just talk like they really hate it, and then
Yeah,
continue to live here for 5 more years. And
yeah,
I think,
yeah,
you're not even from here. You could be anywhere. This is
yeah,
but with the same kind of passion that the actor could just
yeah.
say every theater in Vienna is god awful.
Yeah, and it's not like complaining about life where, committing suicide is quite a big step. Leaving London's easy. I've done it
Yeah,
multiple times in life. I,
it can be done. And
yeah.
it's just, and it's like the actor staying in the Berg Theater. He stays there.
Mm,
He could just
yeah.
leave, but he won't leave because
Yeah.
secretly he loves the Berg.
Yeah, it's like Jonathan Swift could abandon all human contact and go to live with the stables with the horses, the master race, like Gulliver, but he doesn't. The Yahoos are
Yeah.
disgusting, but they have all the life. The section at the end when he realizes when he repeats, "I hate all of these people, but they are my people, and I must love them. I
Mm.
have the responsibility to love them," which almost, almost Christian in its in the way it sounds, which is again, it wouldn't be so shocking and powerful if it was at the end of another normal book that wasn't um, pages of screaming. I it,
It feels like it was written in a single sitting,
hmm,
like because the sentences run into one another and there's that refrain as I sat in the wing chair.
yeah,
Um, it's like a very frenzied text until you're right, it slows down at the end. And I think they're listening to a Purcell um, composition that
but they're listening to Bolero, I
is it
think.
Bolero? Yeah,
Yeah,
and he sort of is reminded that he once enjoyed this and that there's actually something there, that he can just let himself feel contented for a moment. And yeah, of course, when the actor um, redeems himself and roasts, what's her surname? Jeannie.
yeah. I, I
Blit
Bithwell or something.
bit.
yeah.
Yeah, I get her confused because they're all real people in the book, and the real I forget which one is the real genie and which one is the name of the genie in the book. Um,
Mm,
Yeah, I think of all the names, that the only one who keeps her name exactly is Joanna, who did the whole party happened.
yeah.
She did kill herself on the day that she killed herself. Bernhard ran into the Auersberger, who was called Lampersberger, I think, and did invite him to a party on the day of the funeral. It seems to have happened in roughly the way it's described, and much like Pope getting embroiled in all these legal trials, upon the publication of Woodcutters, Bernhardt for like quite a while was embroiled in legal battles with Lampersberger, who sued Bernhardt for libel, won, meaning that all copies of
Wow.
Woodcutters had to be removed by armed policemen, as Bernhardt liked repeating. Armed Austrian policemen with guns went into the bookshops of Austria and took every copy of Woodcutters away, which obviously increased the popularity of
Yeah.
Woodcutters in Germany, in Switzerland, and all over everywhere else in Europe. It was very popular in France. It actually got onto like the normal books bestseller list, not the literary fiction bestseller list in France. And and then the Surkamp Verlag, the publication people, got in touch with Lampersberger and said, oh, and they came to some sort of agreement that meant it could be published in Austria. And by then, Bernhardt vetoed the publication of any of his books now or ever in future in Austria. That no one can publish my books, no one can read or buy my books ever again. They ignored him, but yeah.
Wow. I mean, yeah, there's never been an obscenity trial or any like libel case that hasn't resulted in the Streisand effect. I mean, this guy really told on himself when he was like, I am Auersberger, and this is
Yeah.
me. Yeah, I mean, it's that's extraordinary actually. It does remind you a little bit of Ulysses and how its popularity was
Yeah.
aided by all of the censorship.
Lolita, Clockwork Orange, American Psycho, any of these books that went through a bit of a problematic publication history. It's
Yeah, yesterday
immensely
I was
popular, universally well-known books.
yeah, yesterday I was telling a friend about Woodcutters and I handed her the book and she looked on the back and said, "Oh, this is a formerly banned book. I tend to like those ones."
Mm.
That's all you need to say. It needs to have had some libel history and suddenly it's a hit.
Yeah,
Having been a
But
banned book is like the biggest kind of marker of status nowadays. People make up that books were banned that just weren't banned.
yeah,
Brave New World, I think, is. I saw this as part of a. There's a public. I'm pretty sure it's like a affiliate of Vintage Classics that have like banned Vintage Classics, and Brave New World is on that list. I don't think it was never banned. Maybe in Ecuador or something briefly.
yeah,
In North
one
Korea.
American state,
North Korea, sure.
Yeah.
the Lord of the Rings banned book.
Yeah,
It does strike me that, but what you said earlier, you know, this actor having his one moment of glory, I think it would be really moving if in Pope it was like, but there is this one line of Blackmore, which
yeah,
is
yeah.
obliteratingly beautiful. It's never there. It's never there. But if only, and there's like the satire on reason or critique on reason, the Rochester one with the addition that was later added, which is meant to be optimistic. Like, well, if such a man were to appear, then all the world would be saved. But it's very sort of hedging the bets. But yeah, it would be nice if some of these unremitting. I mean, part of I guess the kind of vulgar beauty of the Dunciad is it is unremitting.
Yeah.
It just goes on and deeper and digs the biggest hole imaginable and then just leaps into it. But
It's what they would have called juvenalian. So where Horace was much more, um, he was much more hesitant to be totally polemical and even to explicitly state his viewpoint. Like Juvenal was always considered the Roman satirist with no mercy and taking no prisoners. And yeah, Pope he just took no prisoners. He was hateful, wonderful. I think one thing I thought about when I was reading the novel actually also is that the speaker reflects on all these affairs that he had with these women and briefly censures himself for having treated them badly or been a bit of a scoundrel. And there is occasional these flashbacks to when the women were young and charming and beautiful, gives them some redemption, like very, very minor. Whereas with Pope, he famously, um, courted married women, as in he wrote letters, had quite intense friendships with them, but was always rejected romantically and sexually, is the implication, partly because he was about 4'11". And I think those instances of rejection led him to destroy the reputation of one or two of these women in his satires, but he never gave them any grace and didn't own up to the fact that he was probably being one of these men who's, pesters and accidentally like invites women to feel sorry for him and is a bit of a sad case. Whereas in this novel you get self-criticism in retrospect from the speaker, which is is quite nice, I think.
Yeah, I'm might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure Bernhardt died a virgin. I think he was
Pope did too.
thoroughly asexual throughout his life. Not like Pope. Maybe build up with some disappointment somewhere, but there did seem to be a genuine disinterest in love and no romantic love anywhere in his novels, which is really fascinating when you compare it to any other novel ever written, which tend to include romantic love somewhere or other. And there is sex is often come at from quite an oblique angle, and as far as I remember in Woodcutters, the only reference is Auersperger's sort of attempt to rape our speaker when he's a boy, a sort of with Nail and I Uncle Monty situation, which was probably the main thing that the libel case was about, to be honest. All these, I sort of missed this the first time I read it, because it is gone over so briefly, and next to all these other long rants, you do miss this. In German, the verb he uses for sort of the sexual predatory behavior of Auersperger is auffressen. Hat versucht, die aufzufressen, which in English you might translate as devour.
Yeah, that's what in my translation it's
Yeah,
devour.
in like an animalistic kind of eating. He trapped them into his bedroom and then tried to devour them. Um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Um,
well, it just brings to mind just on the kind of the Pope and his sexual mania thing. The one poem that seems to me an exception, but this might just be because I don't know that many of his poems. But Eloisa to Abelard, that sort of Ovidian epistle, which is very romantic and yearning and sad, and there's a lot of loss in there, and it's one of the few that isn't filled with a just extremely aggressive invective, maybe at the world, but in a sort of romantic camp that people would be more likely to nod at and be like, yeah, that is very sad. Let the lovers be together. Do you have
hmm.
any insider knowledge on that one? Where's that coming from? Is this another pope we have here, or just the only one of that genre that really made it out?
It's funny, like critics have tried to separate Pope into two popes, um, the two popes, and they usually do it in a half-hearted way I don't find convincing. Basically, Pope wrote in different genres, but he did seem to want to write to actually maybe attain something like the sublime further to the end of his career. So an essay on criticism is the early essay, essay on man is later. Essay on man isn't about tearing down, it's about defending a very difficult thing to defend on its own terms sincerely and doing so in these wonderful couplets. And I think similarly, Eloisa to Abelard it's the closest thing he got to writing love. And it's similar, I think, in many ways to an essay on man. Of course, it like an essay on man, ha quotations get taken out of context and become very famous. So, "Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind" being an Eloisa to Abelard quotation, and essay on man is full of them as well. You know, "Hope springs eternal in the human breast," and so on. So maybe there are two popes, and the later one is like, well, I've been criticizing others for so long. Why don't I put myself to the test and follow my own advice? There's that line in an essay on criticism, I think. Yes, let such teach others who themselves excel and censure freely who have written well. And perhaps he wanted to write well without, satirizing a bit later on. So maybe, yeah. He still wrote satire until the very end, though. The Epistle to
Yeah,
Arbuthnot, I think, is one of the latest ones. Yeah. But no, I mean,
I always
Pope
find it
on Love.
it's always kind of unconvincing when critics divide people. You get it a bit with biblical books. Like these two bits of this book of the Bible must be two different authors because they have a different tone, as if a human being does not have enough inner variety to account for two tones.
Mm,
Um, yeah,
it is interesting with Pope. Then we get a kind of one of the great 18th century poets who is great for saying all the other ones are terrible, and that's pretty much what his reputation rests on. And it reminds me of the early Keats, who most of whose poems in the early period are just about how wonderful it is to write poetry. And you end up in this feedback loop. If all your great poetry is about how bad everyone else's poetry is, when do we get to your great poetry and
yeah.
get back on track? And maybe Eloisa is the attempt. I think it is very good. It is very, very touching in a way that might have been embarrassing. I think had he gone through all this, then wrote a terrible love poem, maybe
Mm,
that would have been kind of the justifiable ending.
yeah.
But
I
glad he
mean,
gave it a shot.
yeah, I think I agree. I like that love is the subject that he finds it in himself to treat sincerely, given
mm,
his own romantic trials and tribulations. Um, and it reminds me of how that's the reverse in Dryden,
yeah,
because Dryden, when he selectively translates Lucretius, he translates from book four of De Rerum Natura, which is the really devastating critique of love and infatuation, which basically says that love is a lie and that lovers are in a state of error and of being deceived because they see a very mediocre woman as being a muse. I didn't recommend this before because it's not really satire, but Dryden's translation of Lucretius's Book 4 is amazing, and it's so harsh. It's extraordinarily harsh about both about women and how they're not all that, and about how young men let themselves be led astray by this fake, this erroneous view of women, which you get a bit in the Bernhardt, right, when he's talking about uh, how he can't believe he ever thought these people were interesting and really,
that is pretty pan gender though.
yeah, that's he talks about certainly both, yeah, both genders.
It brings me to the sort of, I guess, the unofficial through line of this entire podcast experiment is that it's secretly all about translation. And with Rochester and with Pope and with Dryden, we have a tradition of large translations. I mean, Pope's Iliad, Dryden's Ennead, and then Rochester, you get these bits and pieces, especially that Seneca segment seems to be one of his best poems, to my view. But what do you think about translation of this period? I mean, it had a very different method to modern translation, like Pope's Iliad, more of a sort of paraphrase than it is. And people say Pope didn't even know Greek very well. He just was sort of riffing
And Dryden's
on
Aeneid
it
as well. Well, I don't know about the Latin, but yeah.
Totally, like this was translation was being theorized all the time, and the main point of agreement between everyone in the 17th century was you don't want to produce what's called a traduction, which is line by line or word by word literal translation, which then loses the meaning because it can't convey the spirit of the poem in a different context. So that they were talking about Englishing the classics so that they made sense in the way they would have made sense originally to listeners. But in England, where there is a civil war and where these morals can speak to new contexts, and so Cowley and Dryden in particular focus on imitation and paraphrase and amplification, and they say these are the real virtues of translating something like the Aeneid, whereas literalistic translations which try to preserve the exact number of lines or something are betraying the soul or the spirit of the text. Rather betraying in the sense that they are like abandoning rather than showing. So yeah, like you'll find that all of these translations are quite liberal to our minds, perhaps. I mean, this has never been an entirely settled issue.
Yeah, I prefer their way enormously. I find literal translation, first of all, it's impossible. You're chasing something like really difficult. Prose, different. But, if you're doing lyric poetry, it's already such an absurd, impossible exercise. Translating every language's private joke and trying to get it across that I always like best those translations that are controversial and that don't that don't follow the original. Whenever people warn you against the translation, like, oh, I'm much more beguiled by that. Usually,
I kind of wish I
it's
read German actually, because I don't read German. But when I was reading this translation, the the colloquialisms and the tone and the voice sounded a lot more like something written in the 30s or 40s than in the 80s or 90s. So I got the sense I might have been missing something.
yeah. How to describe his prose style? I mean, it's full of neologisms. It's full of he loves like doing that German thing of putting lots of words together. So like lots of whenever Ausberger is described as a Webern Nachfolger, the follower of Webern, that's one word
Okay.
used mockingly and usually like italicized.
Yeah, they kept the italics in my translation. Obviously, they kept the words separate.
Yeah.
But I assume all of the italicized bits in my head, I was thinking that's going to be a massive word.
Yeah, me too. I thought so as well.
And I think because the syntax remains pretty similar, those sentences, the repetition, there's a lot that you can communicate, but there is just a subtle little music that I was delighted when I finally, because I've loved Bernhardt for years now. I first came across him at university when actually a Pope professor at Nottingham, Adam Rounce, said, "I think you'd like this," and I'm pretty sure it was Woodcutters. It might have been Old Masters, one of those great last 4 novels. And yeah, just immediately adored this style of writing. It immediately changed my consciousness in a way. Just this, I found the style so beguiling and so unique. I mean, he pretty much invented a new kind of novel, a new way of writing a novel that just sort of allowed him to put anything in it that he wanted. And when I finally read these books that I'd loved for years in German, it was like a real delight to just realize how beautiful they were as well, how crystalline, how yeah, almost. I mean, it's not an exact equivalent, but it has a similar crystalline, perfect word choice to a Pope couplet. In the German, yeah.
I think I've only just realized you're wearing like a Popian headscarf.
I was like,
why has he done this?
What's going on? David Hume and Alexander Pope started a fashion trend that no one has been brave enough to follow until now. Until today.
Now.
Yeah.
Are you sure it wasn't because they had a bald patch that if you looked at from behind it would have been terrible?
No way.
Vomit inducing. On translation, me and Milo have a sort of absurd artistic project at the moment, which is I'm translating a German translation of Romeo and Juliet into English in sort of rhyming couplets, which Milo, as a fake voice commentator, as a Martinus Scriblerus, is going to analyze and gloss. Should I read some of this Romeo and Juliet?
Yeah. Is the German translation itself in rhyme?
No.
So it actually removed the rhyme from the original, and you're putting it back in, but differently.
There is only some bits of Romeo. There's a bit of rhyme in Romeo and Juliet, but most of it's in blank verse, and it's something like blank verse in German as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm putting rhyme into it unnecessarily.
That's brilliant.
But Milo, the Martinus Scriblerus character, will assume that Romeo... Well, Martinus Scriblerus, as Milo, won't know that Shakespeare exists. He'll assume this is an original creation of the German language that he's translating into English. He'll maybe have a vague idea of Shakespeare as a, contemporary of Marlowe.
A follower of Marlowe.
Yeah. This is just a random dialogue between Benvolio and Romeo at the start. Benvolio: has Venus thickened your veins with dust? Romeo: no, I must go without love where love I must. Benvolio: oh, the love god, so eloquent in appearance, babbles naught but monstrous incoherence. Romeo: oh, that the love god, watching his orbs wane blind, had strapped himself to that which he cannot now find. But tell me, cousin, whence reeks this offal of war? In truth, you mustn't tell me, I have heard it all before. Hate gives us much to do, love more. Hate treasures love, as love lusts for gore. You firstborn twins of twin voids, heavy-souled frivolity, miserably enjoyed. Placeless chaos of glimmering shapes, lead wings, cold embers, and bitter grapes. An everlasting waking sleep, unreconciled, unreal. So do I feel love, and hate what I feel.
Wow. That's I'm blown away. Like, this is...
Yeah, I mean, we've got another friend who's going to write a gloss to Milo's gloss. So, I mean, if you want to jump in as the fourth edition.
You need to issue these like early modern pamphlets where all the titles are really, really long because they refer back to all of the other pamphlets before.
Yeah.
With the title pages and everything.
Talmudic.
I really liked when the or rhyme kept going. I think you should see for how long you can sustain the same rhyme.
Yes, I mean, in a Robert Alter interview, he said in medieval Hebrew poetry, it's quite common to have 100-line poems where every single line rhymes. And he said only a madman would attempt this in English.
You got one.
Immediately making, I think there's a bit, well, let me see. Yeah, that or thing, that's 4 in a row. Yeah, I'll try. Maybe during a very famous bit. Maybe during the balcony scene.
Maybe eight
Yeah.
could be good.
8 seems small.
Yeah.
What word
Romeo.
has the most rhymes in English? Just find that and then
Yeah,
kick off from
maybe
there.
B. Yeah, could I read a bit from the balcony scene?
Please.
Um, Hark, she speaks. Oh, speak again, sweet solar flower. Crack the arches of my skull, scorch with relish the eaves of night like a winged power from heaven, the place set to astonish the upward turned eye of man in his hole, who leans up to the languid clouds as if to caress their flesh with the fingers of his soul, and hover in their billowing breasts. Julia. Romeo. Why then, Romeo? Deny your father, your epithet. If that you cannot do, then no, I can no longer be a Capulet. Romeo, if I do not speak now, then when? Julia, your name is my enemy. You would remain yourself were you not named Montague. Why then, what then is Montague? It is not a bone nor a brain, not a face nor a foot. Oh, have another name. For what is a name? What we call a rose would, named differently, smell the same. So Romeo, called differently, we must suppose, would preserve his precious station, even without title or designation. O Romeo, cast your name into the sea, and for that name, floating off, unmoored, take all of me.
Epithet and Capulet is diabolical. But that again, a success.
Has
Wow.
has to be done.
Yeah, these are the hard decisions. I gotta make them.
Um, where are you going to publish this actually? This is brilliant.
I don't know. Do you have any friends in high places?
I not in like literary, only in journalism, and I wish the LRB would do this, as a series, but I doubt that could happen. But maybe Substack, who knows? Substack
Yeah,
gets a lot of attention.
yeah, maybe. Did you have a classical education, Jane? Are you like Latin from the womb? No.
Certainly not. I mean,
Yeah.
I had to teach myself over the past few years because the la only Latin I was exposed to growing up was actually it was ecclesiastical Latin in church because we did go to a Latin mass, but I never learned
Vatican
it.
II. Who needs it?
Yeah.
Worst
We
worst
would drive
council.
into London.
Yeah.
We would drive like an hour every Sunday to go to the one place that does Latin mass because
Was it the Euston Street? They do
this is
Latin.
Brompton Oratory and that's next to the V&A in South
Oh
Kent.
yeah, I know that
Yeah,
place.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's got the old rite, which is also very important because they've got two Latin masses. One is the high mass, all of the lace and bells and jingles, but it's actually a Novus Ordo technically in
Mm.
Vatican II, but it's in Latin, post Vatican II, but in Latin. But they still have the old rite or the what you will hear referred to as the Tridentine rite or the traditional Latin mass.
Not
David.
that Latin mass, the even more conservative Latin mass.
Yeah,
Not
David.
that hippie Latin mass.
So yeah, that was my exposure growing up, but I didn't. I went to sort of state comprehensive Catholic schools, and they don't teach Latin. They teach any language appallingly. So I didn't have a classical education growing up, but I don't mind it. Like, um, I don't resent that at all. I do wish state schools could teach Latin though.
Yeah. Or something
Yeah,
something along those lines. I'm jealous
yeah.
of
My
all my
my.
homies who speak Old English. Go on,
Oh,
Milo. Yeah.
you
Well,
have
I
homies
just
that
my.
speak Old English?
Don't we all?
You're in Oxford. Surely you can't throw a rock without hitting a
Uh,
homie who speaks Old English.
we do have in English Lit in Oxford a compulsory course in Anglo-Saxon or Old English, which is amazing. But
Yeah.
it's a year-long mandatory, and so you do get to grips with the language somewhat, but I certainly didn't leave speaking Old English.
Mm.
But some of the homies, surely.
One of the homies that one of the
Sorry.
homies, I have one homie who can write in Old English,
Yeah.
like produce his own poetry, which is incredible.
Yeah. The good. Yeah. What were the first poems you like really loved apart, anything pre-Essay on Man? Like the first like real huge poetic loves.
Oh, I mean, as a teenager, I became Yeats obsessed. Obsessed with Yeats, obsessed with Eliot. But earlier than that, I was a novel person.
Mm,
I read Dickens and Bronte, and that was my in, I suppose. I loved Shakespeare as well. I will say, okay, maybe like Macbeth or The Tempest
mm.
when I was a kid and went to go and see them at the Globe might have sparked an interest in poetry for me. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, but Yeats and Eliot of like lyric poetry. Yeah. What
yeah.
do you have a favorite Yeats poem? Is it Byzantium?
It's impossible to choose. There are dozens of Yeats poems that over the years I've designated as my favorite, but I think I always go back to a couple. One is Among School Children, which is fantastic. The Tower, which is the obviously a
Yeah, yeah.
part of the collection, but the actual poem, The Tower.
Mm,
Um, I like Who Goes with Fergus. I love that one. Um, Crazy Jane and the Bishop,
mm.
but I can't name a single favorite because there are just too many. Yeah. All Souls Night is a very
Yeah.
good one as well, about ghosts and mummies.
Mm.
Do
I
you
th
have a favorite lyric poem either by Yeats or anyone else?
I'm gonna go with Yeats's Byzantium. I
Subtle
no,
foreshadowing.
subtle. Well, no, I don't know. I don't know actually. I think that poem is enchanted, and it ends with the greatest line in iambic pentameter. I could do the lead up to the last line.
Sure.
A straddle on the dolphin's mire and blood. Spirit after spirit, the smithies break the flood. The golden smithies of the emperor. Marbles on the dancing floor break bitter furies of complexity. Those images that yet fresh images beget. That dolphin torn, that gong tormented sea.
Dolphins are a great poetic subject.
Yeah,
They are. Is that
torn.
there's
The
Well done.
verb
That's
torn.
amazing.
Yeah.
There's a dolphin
there
in Lycidas by Milton.
Yes, yeah,
Look homeward, angel, now, and melt with ruth, and oh, ye dolphins, waft the hapless youth. And actually, as a teen, that was my favorite couplet of all time, I think.
yeah, yeah. We were gonna ask your favorite couplet because we've been, locked in our dungeons reading last week thousands of couplets. It's so nice reading something that's not in couplets after reading the whole of Absalom and the whole of Rochester and all
Oh
of this
man.
Pope. I'm
and
oh
something without certain words in it after Rochester. A real freedom from certain words.
You
Oof.
have to put the in your Romeo and Juliet, you have to include the rhyme whirled and hurled, because that's probably the rhyme that appears with the greatest frequency between the years of Dryden and the years of Pope. And they both and Rochester, they all use that rhyme. It's for some reason a really big trope at the time. So
the most
there is
common rhyme in pop music is world and girl.
really, and it's
Yeah,
not even a rhyme.
it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, what a cop out. What
Wow.
about the rhyme love and move? That's the real popular one in Poe.
Louvre and move. Yeah, I guess in Shakespeare it must have been pronounced something like Louvre.
Yeah. These pop songwriters really need to get to grips with the word hurled,
I
and
know.
it's no one's they're all these hurling things.
It's
Do,
incredible. Yeah, the decline of literature
yeah.
traced in a single rhyme.
Do you have a favorite literary revolution, Jane? A favorite like big overturn? I've just thought at the end of this rhyming couplets era, it was so refreshing to read a Wordsworth poem. It's like, oh
Mm.
my gosh, fresh air. Oh, this feels so nice. Yeah.
I think that the anti-rhyme move in Milton is very refreshing because his whole the zeitgeist at the time was so pro-rhyme. So reading Paradise Lost and the blank verse there is wonderful for this reason. Of course, Dryden puts essentially tries to put Paradise Lost into rhyme, which is hilarious given that so much of Milton's preface to the poem is about how rhyme is it doesn't do justice to great ideas and that blank verse is the great form. But yeah, Milton being standing out from the crowd and doing Paradise Lost with no rhyme is a great move, I think. It means that it's such a wonderful poem to read. You don't get tired. You might actually know, you might get tired, but not because of the
Impossible to
rhyme.
get tired during.
I don't know. Yeah, totally bullshitting.
Yeah.
But if you read, not the whole thing at once, but take a canto, or sorry, a book, I think it's a refreshing experience.
Was your choice of PhD subject partially determined by the consideration of which poets you were willing to ruin for yourself forever?
Ooh, no, because I regret that. I will not be able to read Dryden again ever after this, and probably not Cowley. Although Abraham Cowley, who's my main focus, was already considered a bad poet by and large. So I didn't ruin him for myself because I already wouldn't have read him for pleasure. So
I discovered something interesting recently. There is no sort of mass market collected or selected poetry volume for Dryden in either Penguin or Oxford World Classics as you'd expect. What's up with that?
yeah, one reason is he's not popular.
Good reason.
That'll do it.
He's taught, so kids at school always have to read a bit of Dryden, or they used to. Um, he's canonical, but I don't think people read him for pleasure very much. So there's a huge scholarly edition of everything because he wrote vast quantities. But yeah, he's more of a scholar's poet than a reader's poet, I would say. And maybe it is because he looms so large and he's dreaded by all of those school children, Gen Xers and boomers who had to read Absalom and Achitophel, and went away hating him. So possibly that he ruined by the school curriculum, perhaps. But no, he wrote such long things as well. He wasn't a short producer. He wasn't a producer of short lyrics so much.
Apart from those great Saint Cecilia's Day things,
Yeah,
which
that's
are like my,
true.
my favorite thing he ever did. And I mean, that's the only thing that's like in the Oxford Book of English Verse.
Yes, and those
So,
are still sung. I mean, what is it? Handel must have been the setting. Um, but yeah, like that's true. That's an exception. Those odes are really fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, the final line of the song to Saint Cecilia's Day breaks the Peri Bathos rule. When that last and dreadful hour, this crumbling pageant shall devour, the trumpet shall be heard on high, the dead shall live, the living die, and music shall untune the sky.
Yes.
The sky has no tune. Breaks the Peri Bathos rule. Best
Although
line Dryden ever wrote.
that there was this, he's probably playing on the idea that there's universal music that we can't hear, but that it's divine. The Dante thing.
And yeah, the music of the spheres,
Exactly.
yeah,
But you're right, untune the sky. Oh my gosh, that's such a good phrase. What passions cannot music raise or quell?
the instrument by instrument descriptions are
Yeah,
great. The violin's jealous pangs, yeah.
and the way the meter changes,
Oh, so
that
refreshing
Pindaric
after
way.
Absalom. My gosh, why didn't this guy do more meter changing?
Okay, this is so funny that you say because the Pindaric ode, or the style of Cowley, because he was the first to do a whole collection of English Pindaric odes, was famous for this really changeable meter. One line of 10 or 12 syllables followed by 6 syllable line, and then back to 8 or 10. And I find it refreshing. It's fiery. Christopher Smart loved it. The mad guy who wrote Jubilate Agno about his cat Jeffrey, he loved that. But everyone after Dryden basically hated on Cowley's Pindaric Ode, and they thought that it was a really messy and ugly, wobbly form. And so then the Augustan age of these unremitting heroic couplets came in to replace it. But no one ever talks positively about the Pindaric form that is in Dryden's Saint Cecilia Ode, except you. You're the first person I've heard.
Just you.
The turban, this very niche opinion.
Why isn't he writing it in heroic couplets like a good poet?
There's a bit in Perry Bathos in my notes here that I said sounded almost Taoist, if you were to take it unironically, which is obscurity bestows a cast of the wonderful and throws an oracular dignity upon a piece which has no meaning.
Say it again.
Obscurity bestows a cast of the wonderful and throws an oracular dignity upon a piece which has no meaning.
Beautiful.
And music,
And very harsh.
I'm not sure that the sky being untuned does have a meaning, but but it's so gloriously magical. Do you know the Zen koan about with the dog? Does the dog have a Buddha nature? Do you know this thing, Jane?
No.
So it's one of the most famous of the Zen koans. This is a form in Zen Buddhism where there's a disciple and a master, and the disciple asks something and the master gives an answer, and they're usually very short. And the disciple asks the master, "Does a dog have a Buddha nature?" And the master responds, "Moo."
Very wise.
That's wow.
It's not even the right animal.
It reminds me of one of my favorite anecdotes of all time, which is from my life. So
you rate it very highly.
it's very short. When I was in the Brompton Oratory at the Latin Mass as a child,
all good anecdotes start this way. This
madman runs up to the sanctuary. It's a very big sanctuary. You know, there are several priests saying mass at any given time, and comes up to the lectern and says, "You're all sheep. Moo."
Wow, very
the same exact. I mean, not the right animal, and he's mooing for a sheep. The police were promptly called, and he was reprimanded by Father Rupert, who did a good job at being extremely stoic and yet firm. But yeah, it's funny. Okay, so yeah, I have to say I don't know what a Zen. What did you call it?
Look, this is one of these words I've only ever seen written down, but it's like Kuan, Kuan, Kwan.
Zen Kwan.
Kwan. I mean, Japanese. It's a long way away for this little tongue.
Sorry, I have heard a little paradox.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite satire or satirical body of work in the sort of late modern period in our current world?
Max Beerbohm's collection of caricatures called A Christmas Garland, and you could read it around Christmas time. He parodies people like G.K. Chesterton and Henry James in these small vignettes, and it's brilliant. He was mostly known for his cartoon caricatures, but he was a good writer. That one I always read.
He has a good novel, doesn't he? The one about all the undergrads in Oxford killing themselves for
like
a girl.
Dobson.
Yeah.
He's a great Oxford figure. So yeah, A Christmas Garland. And then in very late modern, because obviously that's 100 years old now. I was watching Max Berry, one of his skits for the IT crowd. And I think Matt Berry, just anything he does is brilliant. This one is on Spaceology, the skit that I watched today, where he's making fun of quack, like mystic scientists of the cosmos. I don't know if you know. Have you ever seen Toast of London?
I have not. No, I'm
I've
sure
seen
I would
a little
know what
of it.
Matt Berry's face is.
Oh, you know him in the voice.
I know Matt
he has,
Berry.
Yeah, he has the voice.
Yeah.
You'll know him.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your go-to? I mean, obviously, The Thick of It is one of my favorite comical satire TV shows.
I think the greatest literary satirical body of work in our epoch of sort of late industrial consumer civilization, and I say this without the slightest hint of irony, are the scripts to the Simpsons television show seasons 3 to 8, roughly. A show like all of these poets of profound hypocrisy, because it vehemently and mercilessly sort of vomits in rage at the way of life which it simultaneously enormously benefits from and fits into like a glove. in Middle America in the 90s clearly had enough stores of like interior irony to adore this show, which despises them, and to fill all their landfills with an absurd tonnage of Bart Simpson don't have a cowman merch. Jonathan Swift said he wrote to vex the world rather than divert it, and the Simpsons discovered a way of engaging in simultaneous vexation and diversion to quite a high degree. And it is quite a shock going back to those 90s Simpsons now, just to and to notice just how scathing it is. Yeah,
That's
It's good that
very well said.
it's good that it's lasted forever as well, because it's become its own kind of a shadow and mirror. Like Alexander Pope failing and writing the romantic poem, he's crumbled to beauty, as we all agree late Simpsons has crumbled to beauty.
Yeah. It's always amazing to see how strong its predictive power is, which is evidence, obviously, of its insight and its diagnostic power. But because it seemingly has predicted quite, quirky, strange events in the culture before they happened. So I have to say, though, growing up, The Simpsons was banned in my household because it's obscene.
Yeah. Anna
And
has
No,
the
it was
same
too-
problem. This is
Too scathing. It was too true.
It was
Silence
too
it.
true.
The Privy Council said no.
Yeah,
We shall not bear the yellow men.
they keep coming up after the Tridentine Mass.
Every
Episode
That
after
was
episode.
weird that it was every episode. But I never liked that mass.
Novus Ordo, much better Mass.
If you
Yeah,
have
like they-
episodes of The Simpsons to recommend, do set, because I've seen very few, which
Yeah.
is one of my great gaps.
honestly, seasons 3 to 7 is pretty like endless glory. I mean, Milo did a complete rewatch fairly recently, and I think you said it wasn't just like there was a classic here and there. It was episode after episode continuously, and sort of a dazzling rainbow was classic. Yeah,
How do you,
Yeah,
you guys
I-
have so much time on your hands.
we do.
No,
How
what-
does Hang on a minute here. No, Milo really does. I mean, I don't understand where you. I suppose I write things, and Milo writes less. Although you write like 900 reviews of films a day, but those
This is
seem to just
true.
sort of leak from your being.
They're ejaculated from your
I-
brain.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I would have said, yeah. I go to work sometimes. There's room for all kinds of things in this life.
Yeah, Milo's favorite movie is a satire.
It is indeed.
Yeah, Doctor.
I was revving that one up. Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah.
Ah,
What
yeah.
that's just wonderful the whole way through. And it did stop nuclear war. There are many reasons people have put forward to why that there was not a nuclear Armageddon, but specifically it was the release of Dr. Strangelove by Stanley Kubrick that stayed everyone's hand.
Khrushchev in like a sweat over the button. Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you seen Cabaret, Jane? The Liza Minnelli film?
Oh no, actually.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking of the other film about cabaret dancers. No, I haven't seen Eliza.
Yeah, that's a good satire, which it kind of undermines its own message in an interesting way. It's like a castigation of this unbridled Weimar liberal hedonism, which creates sort of a moral vacuum into which Nazism can enter. It's almost like a fairly common moral, social, conservative reading of the rise of the Third Reich. Because all you people could think about was pleasure, you didn't notice history banging at the door. The thing which makes the movie kind of complicated is that it absolutely adores Weimar liberal hyper-hedonism. It loves skimpily leather-clad dancers, it loves champagne fountains, it loves frivolous luxury, it loves camp, loves total sexual abandonment, and is constantly undermining the thing which it is simultaneously saying. I don't think it's doing so consciously either. It has this like delightful internal contradiction, which I sometimes think is the the condition of good satire is being internally conflicted about something. In order to actually loathe something or with sufficient energy and sufficient imagination, you need to be turning inward a bit. You need to be at war with yourself. Maybe the war with oneself is what creates the energy. I don't know.
I guess so. I mean, you could, yeah. I don't know. I think that's a condition for some good satire, but it's also what makes some satire bad. And this is what I think of Megalopolis, the recent disaster.
Whoa, whoa.
Guys, read my critic review of that film. No, I hate it. But because it doesn't really know what it's saying, like luxuriates so much in excess, even just at the level of form and cinematography, while saying, look how terrible these peacocking, excessive, patrician class types are. And it's just such a confused film that usually I don't mind if something is confused. If that's not a condition, or that doesn't make something necessarily bad. But I just think this film is necessarily bad.
What about the kind of utopic city with all the escalators? That would make movement a lot easier, I thought.
It would be cool to have a big golden escalator, yeah.
I love how high the tone is for what Megalopolis should be and what it is, and then the reality of being like a public park with escalators.
It's so shit. Looks like AI. It's terrible. It's sentimental, just as a structure, this megalon. Yeah, I mean, it's golden.
We'll all come round to it. We'll come round to it, I think.
Sunny Hope being the name of the baby. What the hell?
The eye reveal. The eye reveal.
You could do that right now. You've got the correct headgear.
Hair reveal.
Can't believe Jane Cooper didn't like Megalopolis.
Yeah, that was a real down point of the interview.
Didn't see that coming. Seemed to miss the escalators in the she said but she didn't
really understand how useful those escalators would be. Yeah,
maybe if you're in Oxford and it's a little town but imagine you're in Megalopolis.
Precisely. That'd be really handy. You got to get from A to B, and think like those escalators looked so useful. And she completely dismissed this as if this was irrelevant. It's interesting that loads of the most famous movie satires actually cause the thing that they're satirizing. I mean, Clockwork Orange caused people to like start rape gangs. Fight Club made people start fight clubs.
Joker,
Taxi Driver and Joker both made people shoot people.
What about falling down? Do you think that led to any like people having meltdowns in traffic?
Yes.
Probably.
I think so. Whereas Dr. Strangelove did not cause nuclear war. Again, we can see clearly the superiority of this satire in that it did not precipitate the very event it wanted to prevent.
Well, maybe we're just an age. Maybe it's a generation thing. We can't really understand people doing things in voices which they are against. Thinking of like as soon as Trump got in, Stephen Colbert was no longer the Republican guy doing the joke thing. People just we need to see the mask drop fast now.
There's this idea that you endorse everything that you portray in your art. So obviously people think it's problematic to like Nabokov. It's just hyper like simplistic, vulgar readings of autobiography into everything. And it's partly because the prevailing literary genre is autofiction, perhaps. Sally Rooney just obviously writing about herself every time. Obviously making her protagonist basically an even more politically virtuous version of herself. And if kids are exposed to all of that, maybe they turn that lens onto older texts where actually there's a lot of distance between the voice and the author.
Yeah, maybe the complication of goodness and sincerity. A very good work is very sincere and earnest and true. And so everyone is aiming at the good work, and so they're naturally being taffled up with themselves. And even something that they're depicting
that they don't actively believe. There's a subconscious desire layered in there, so you're sort of trapped.
Yeah, I saw like a list of red flag books of men you are dating.
Yeah.
And it was like all satires. It was, yeah, it was like American Psycho.
Blood
Uh,
Meridian, Brave New. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's also just that it's written by men. Like, that's ultimately why people like this think David Foster Wallace is problematic, because he's very male. I really think that's it.
yeah, it was interesting like reading all these guys, all these hate-filled guys, this Pope and Rochester and Bernhardt, thinking like it is very masculine, this stance, this opposition to reality, I suppose. I can't think of a woman who fits the same sort of mold. In all of these guys, there's this feeling that the fall and the creation are the same act. Let there be light and the apple are the same exact moment. At least in someone like Bernhardt, and certainly in the kind of German philosophical tradition he's coming from, like Schopenhauer and
Yeah, I mean, I think um, that's right in the early modern period, though there is an attempt to retrieve something from the fall. You know, the Felix Culpa is a big theological and artistic theme, which is that, well, without the fall, we wouldn't be able to appreciate. It's kind of a theodicy, you know, without the fall, we wouldn't really be able to appreciate the good because we wouldn't know the bad. And without that contrast, you don't have a full knowledge of the good. Um, but
yeah,
at the same time,
the Augustine quote is the epigraph to Clockwork Orange.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a tension in Lucretius as well. This feeling that nature is kind of random and brutal, but you should attempt to sort of be more in line with it at the same time. There's this interesting, which maybe results in this kind of stance to reality ultimately.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, the idea that Lucretius wanted us all to act a bit like atoms falling through a void, clashing into everything, is a Christian polemic that flourished when he was first being translated in the mid 17th century, but it is totally unfair. Like, the poem begins with a prayer to Venus, saying that everything flows from you and is in, if not teleological, it's still infused with divine purpose, love, and meaning and fertility. And of course, for him, an atom is a seed, seed having, you know, all of these fertile connotations. So, yeah, Lucretius was much more positive about the state of nature than people thought, and even tried to sort of, you know, look at the plague with a sense of optimism, seeing the positive side of the plague
hmm.
and the flood. Whereas someone like Rochester liked Lucretius because he thought this is highly pessimistic, or at least he wanted to make him seem pessimistic. And yeah, you're going back to that masculine, pessimistic Hobbesianism that satirists would performatively take on.
Yeah. Also a bit like in like some of those Shakespeare characters, was especially Hamlet. I'm thinking, yeah, who
Yeah,
might
Hamlet's funny because he's so feminine, but I guess he gets more masculine towards the end when he does sort of the nihilistic antic thing.
which seems like the most thorough nihilism in any of the Shakespeare plays, except perhaps the Macbeth Tomorrow and Tomorrow would also be in there.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, the nihilism in Shakespeare. Um,
I feel like in King Lear, in the sort of middle wilderness sections as well, we get this at least the return to nature. But then what does that mean? What are you left with?
yeah,
Um,
hurricanes and cataracts.
mm.
And of course, in some of the comedies, you do get malcontents like Jacques, who notes that everything is fake and performative. Um,
which play is he from?
this is As You Like It, so it's sort of,
Oh, I've been calling him Jacques.
yeah.
Again, a word I've only ever read.
You'd think it would be Jacques, like the French name, but
They
it
teach you
was
these things
pronounced.
at Oxford.
Jacques.
Jacques. Jacques for absurdity. My God, the people are taught to pronounce that name Jacques.
It was pronounced Jacques,
Yeah.
which is weird. And I did learn why this is the case, and then I forgot. Sorry.
Why was Shelley not funny? It's a question for the ages.
Um,
we expect awaitedly so.
it wasn't a
Politics.
funny age, was it? Like, well, sorry, no, it wasn't, but Shelley was of the camp that was just so self-serious.
Karl Marx claimed Shelley was his biggest intellectual influence. Also, not Mr. Laughs, not Mr.
No.
Humor. No.
Yeah, Marx's favorite Shakespeare, I think, Timon of Athens,
It has
of
lots of money in
which,
it.
yeah, Rochester wrote a poem, one of his less funny ones about Timon. There's something about not being funny in this guy.
You said that there's you sort of you become less interested in poetry in the 18th century, or like me too. What to you is like the drop off? What causes it? Could it be political stability? The death of all art?
Well, it wasn't a very stable century politically. Of course, England responded so much to France. Yeah, I think it's the rise of this sort of very interior, nostalgic and neurotic kind of lyric poetry in Keats, Shelley, and then obviously the zenith of that is Wordsworth. I still really like bits of Keats, Shelley, and Wordsworth. I have to be fair to them. But the Romantics, I think, are just a bit less, well, they're certainly less funny. They're less classical
Hmm.
in a kind of grand epic way. They're less, you know, interested in society, and this is a hugely reductive thing to say, but you know, the kind of idea of pastoral warbling when on your lonesome, that produces odes and sonnets is just a little bit less interesting to me than the brilliant long didactic cosmic stuff of the 17th century. And I think that's why I made that judgment. And then much of the 19th century poetry is that a little more boring, often quite sentimental, romantic stuff. And then the really interesting experimental era dawns at the end of the 19th century with people like Hopkins.
Yeah.
So I think it's just that this period is surrounded by so much virtuosity that to me, like it is a bit of a lapse.
Yeah, I suppose it's like this solipsism as well. You're not in the room in 19th century poetry with all the people. It doesn't feel like you're talking. I mean, it's one of the things I love about Bernhard as well. He's always just in society. This is such a perfect man to be alone in the woods. And all of his novels have some sort of longing to be alone in the woods, but he never leaves this society. And it just infuses them with so much kind of humanity and self-awareness and empathy.
Yeah. And there's so many characters.
Yeah, yeah, and the 19th century, the whole romantic turn sort of goes towards a confessional kind of selfishness. There's
Mm.
maybe it's just that there's an unattraction to selfishness, that poems, when you think of a poet today, you think of someone, the cliche image is someone talking about themselves, um, uh, alone. And it's what's so nice about I particularly love this the 17th century is that it's so embedded in the world and takes on so many different voices
Hmm.
and is so full of wit. It's not just trying to say who like I am me. This is what I'm feeling. It breaks free of that. I think very constrictive romantic mold.
Yeah, I completely agree. I find the single-voiced confessional poem a lot less interesting than one which might speak to very personal experience, but in a way that catalyzes the personal into the universal, right? This is Eliot's theory of impersonality. And even in Rochester's To a Postboy, Rochester is a character speaking to one other person, and though there's only one line uttered by the other character, it's still couched in this form that is dramatic and that is personifying, let's say.
If in the 20th century, I just think lots of the poets, I tend to like prefer the Americans, especially after the war. I much prefer those in the sort of Elizabeth Bishop school to the Robert Lowell school. I like Robert Lowell himself a lot, but I don't really like what he starts, and but I do adore this kind of more oblique way of talking about your own life that Elizabeth Bishop had. I mean, when her lover died after 17 years living together, she writes this Robinson Crusoe poem about Robinson Crusoe. Just very briefly mentions the relationship with Friday, and
Yeah.
who at the end of the poem it said, "Who died 17 years ago this March,"
Yeah.
which I find much more touching than even the most touching parts of like Lowell at his best. And Skunk Hour, or one of the poems in Life Studies. Yeah. Do you feel alienated from modern poetry? I mean, your whole life at the moment is several hundred years ago.
Yeah, I don't read much modern poetry for the reasons that you've given, actually. I think there is just a vast amount of narcissistic confession to wade through when you're reading modern stuff, so that it makes finding the really good poems quite difficult. And I don't like having to plow through this material. Like I like knowing that there's a genius poem in my collection of Hardy or Yeats that's on my shelf. So might be laziness that explains why I don't engage with much contemporary poetry. But yeah, I don't like the confessional turn of Plath, Sexton. That I like a lot of Lowell, particularly early Lowell, which is really impersonal. Like um, the Quaker Graveyard. The Quaker Graveyard at Nantucket is one of the most extraordinary poems of the 20th century, and it's very Moby Dick-esque. But yeah, the life studies is much less interesting, and just so much poetry now is about signaling your victimhood, kind of vomiting out your trauma, kind of getting applause for it, talking about politics. I find it a lot more tedious than most of the canon that I read anyway.
Just gearing up for another Dunciad here. I feel like, someone's got to do it. I keep sort of daydreaming about it. Someone who knows enough of the contemporary scene and hates all of it to the degree of Pope to compose such a thing.
It's what you were born for, Jane.
Oh
Here
wow.
it is.
The hell with my PhD. That's on pause. I'm gonna do that.
The Dunciad 2. The title's there.
It's interesting that
Professional boogaloo.
you didn't dislike Bernhardt, though. I mean, I could imagine a less generous reader having the same criticisms of wallowing in himself. This novel I told you to read wasn't particularly political. He can get political at other times. There are brief throwaway lines about Austrian political parties at the time, but
But I liked it because it was brave enough to have a go at Philistines. Like I think nowadays people are terrified of seemingly criticizing middlebrow or Philistine art and criticism because it's somehow snobbish and that's coded in a politically problematic way. Whereas like this book isn't worried about coming for the Philistines. And it is also self-indicting, in the end. But you're right, it's obviously very, very confessional in some sense. But it's very confessional poetry after like Plath was quite ironic because rather than being confessional in the Catholic sense of telling somebody your sins and your faults, it's really about absolving yourself and pointing at others or at events in your childhood or at events in the world that victimize you. That's what Plath did. That's what Hughes did when he wrote birthday letters about Plath after she'd killed herself. He basically was implicitly saying the whole time, yeah, this was really hard on me too, like your dad just traumatized, the death of your father just haunted our marriage. Like this isn't confession in a sort of honest way, even though its claim is that it's hyper honest to an uncomfortable degree, but I think it's actually morally quite dishonest a lot of the time.
One of the things I liked so much about Perry Bathos was also this ability to this complete unfazedness about seeming snobbish, just
Yeah,
perverse hyper snobbery to the nth degree
yeah,
without shame. There's a bit when he says like if children are reading crap and writing crap, which almost all of them will, it would be better off if they remained illiterate. Yeah, there's no question. Pope's never asking, "Am I being orthodox?"
yeah.
No.
Yeah, he had a staggering self-confidence, which is becoming of someone with that amount of talent, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from the very beginning as well, which I think is sort of startling. As a teenager who hasn't written much, like his first sort of great epic, he burnt because he thought it was that bad.
Mm.
And then almost immediately afterwards starts saying how bad everyone else is at poetry. And again, it's like the thing with Keats, whose first good poems were about writing good poems.
Yeah.
I've sort of like, when did you write the good poem you're talking about? This is all you've done. But it's a remarkable ability to immediately become the authority and become kind of right as well. Because you could become the authority extremely wrongly. I think that's probably quite common.
Mm.
But and I guess it just becomes a question of taste, which it's like the Burlington Epistle. It's if you've got it, you've got it. And he had talent as well, but taste is sort of your foundation.
Taste is that megalon material that is mysterious and irreducible, and either it's there or you have it or you don't. Yeah.
Escalators.
Yeah.
Once you become like an academic, Jane, are you going to like just sit cozy in the job and get to the real business of writing poetry?
Well, I don't know what I'll become, and I doubt poet is one of them because I like writing in private. I don't really share most of my stuff, and it probably is like vanity in the end. You're too proud to put out things which you don't think are very good. Um, so I don't think I will. But maybe if I do, satire will be a good place to start because you can always say, "Hey, it's like not really me. It's my voice, character." Take it up with him.
Dunciad too. Dunciad too, I think.
Dunciad too. Dunciad too. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording just so we have less to edit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reading the Dunciad, it sort of reminds me that I don't really think that way
Hmm.
in the world.
Yeah.
I'm quite an amicable chap. It would be interesting to be. There are the people you encounter them who almost all things they hate.
Hmm.
There are things they love, but almost every book they read, film they see, album they hear, it's like that was pretty bad,
Hmm.
really.
Yeah.
Which has not been my attitude, but it must have been Pope. That must have
Yeah.
been him.
Moo.